World Development Report 2014, Risk and Opportunity. Managing Risk for Development, Key Obstacles to Risk Management, with Stefan Halagat, lead author, World Development Report 2014.
One might wonder why risk management on the ground, when you look at the real-world situation, is not done better. It's difficult to implement what we know we should be implementing, and it's really important to analyze these obstacles to better understand what we should do to manage the risk better. Look at a big city like Mumbai, for instance. The city is flooded almost every year by monsoon rain, and always the same neighborhoods are affected. And after each of these big floods, one can find reports being published by the city, independent researchers, or any other organization, analyzing the problem and reaching always the same conclusion, that the first thing to do in Mumbai is to be better at managing the drainage system and to be better at managing solid waste, because solid waste is clogging the drainage system and explain a lot of these floods. In the report, we're trying to provide a guiding principle to analyze these obstacles, looking at a series of issues, looking at incentives first, then looking at information, then behaviors, and then resources. So the first obstacle we meet to manage risk properly is linked to the incentives different actors have to manage the risk. Let's start with the private actors. A lot of private actors do not have an incentive to manage risk properly just because the actors making the decision about risk is not the actor being affected if something goes wrong. A typical example is local air pollution. The owner of a chemical factory is creating health risks for the neighbors of the factory in case of normal operation with pollution or in case of accidents. The owner is capturing all the benefits from taking the risk, but is not suffering from all the losses if something goes wrong. This incentive problem is not only an issue for private actors. Public decision makers also have incentive issues. One thing which is very clear about risk management is how the cost of doing risk management is very visible. It's a cost that is very often immediate, like the cost can be seen in the few years following a project or a new policy. And because the cost is so visible, the people losing from a risk management policy will try to oppose the measure. But the beneficiaries of risk management, in most cases, they might be in the future. So if you're thinking about flood management, for instance, maybe the flood that will be avoided is 10 years in the future. The benefits are also in the form of avoided impacts. And nobody can see avoided impacts. It's not something that is observable, visible, that you can put in a picture. So the benefits from risk management are just difficult to grasp and to take into account. And finally, the benefits from risk management are very broadly shared across the population, so you don't have a small group benefiting. There is very little reward in doing risk management for a public decision maker, and a lot of costs and risks and problems. Assuming that incentives are right, it doesn't mean that all problems will be solved. Sometimes you have situations where people have the right incentives, but they don't have the information to act upon these incentives. So let's take two examples. Someone is buying a house, and clearly when you buy a house, you want to take into account the risk of being flooded or the risk because you live next to a polluting industry or something. But if you're not informed about the risk, it's very difficult, it's impossible even to make the decision. Another case that's really clear is the case of evacuation. We know that if we provide the information to people through early warning system, if we can inform them that there is a risk and that they have to move away from the risky area, we can save a lot of lives. And looking at Bangladesh, for instance, the number of deaths in case of hurricane has been decreased by a factor maybe 100, thanks to better warning systems and better evacuation schemes. Sometimes we observe that people have the right incentives and the right information, but still they don't act upon it. So we have plenty of examples of this. We have people who refuse to evacuate in case of a storm or a hurricane, even though they are told that there is a risk. But there are also people failing to take into account some of the health risk we know very well. It can be about smoking, it can be about diets. Sometimes we are well aware that we should do something, but we fail to do it just because it's difficult, it's costly, and we prefer to think about something else. So these behavioral obstacles are extremely important to take into account. And in terms of risk management, there are two things that are particularly important. First, the tendency to be overconfident. If you ask people about the risks they face, they always think that they face risks which are lower than the rest of the population. And if you ask everybody, they all think the same. So we have always a tendency to think that risks are for the others and not for ourselves. And the second very important issue is the fact that we have a very short memory. Let me give you an example. In places where you have very frequent floods, people know they are living under the threat of being flooded, and they have to be careful about it, and they have to evacuate in case of warning and so on. And when you increase the level of protection, when you're successful in your risk management, instead of having frequent floods, you have very rare ones, so every 10, 20 years. And in that case, people might just forget that the risk is there, and the day they need to evacuate and there is a warning, they might just not do it because the memory of past events is gone and they don't realize that this is something really important. If we are successful in doing all that, so managing the incentives, the information, and the behavior, sometimes people would like to do the right thing in terms of risk management, but they can't just because they lack resources. So if there is an early warning for a flood and you have an incentive to go away, to evacuate, you have the information, you react well, but you don't have any road or any public transportation means or a car to evacuate, if you lack the resources to do it, then you will be unable to do it. It's very important to look at the resource issue in this framework of multiple obstacles. If you don't have the right incentives, the right information, or if you have behavioral issues, then it might be useless or even counterproductive to just look at the resource only. And that's why in this series of assessment of the obstacles, we suggest that the assessment of the resource issues arrives last. So in this sequence of obstacles, there is one last thing that really needs to be considered. It's the uncertainty on risk. If you look at many issues from finance management, natural risks, climate change, health, all that is in many cases very uncertain. Uncertainty is a fundamental issue with risk management, and it needs to be confronted and accepted and dealt with, not disregarded, even though it might be a difficult thing to do. These obstacles, from the incentives to the uncertainty, explain why risk management is a difficult thing to do, explains why there is a lot of progress that we can make in terms of how we manage risk. And to guide policy action, we suggest two principles to keep in mind when designing risk management strategies. The first one is to be realistic. And in cases where some simple solutions can work, even though these solutions might not be the optimal ones, maybe simplicity is something that we should follow. And that especially is the case in low capacity and low income environments where very sophisticated policies or tools might be very difficult to implement in practice. The second principle is to build foundations for risk management without trying to solve the problems once and for all. Because the problem is uncertain, because the problem is complex, it's very difficult to design a policy that will manage the risk properly, regardless of how different people will react and how the context will change. So we really need to implement basic policies that focus on what's most important, like setting the right incentives for people to manage the risk well or making the information available, and to make sure the policies are revised over time regularly to correct over time when more information is available or when we observe that some policies might have some negative side consequences.